So what if I told you that the story of Mewtwo was actually a lot darker than we've originally been told? Now, a lot of this content that I'm about to get into is basically, if you think about it, it's not something that would be too shocking. But found in some of the prototype maps and data, we actually have reason to believe that Mewtwo's story was a little bit longer than what the original games had. Again, content that was scrapped from the original game due to cartridge limitations. So this is some stuff that's very interesting. So basically, I'll give it to you in a nutshell. This is what we know in the final versions of Pokemon. Giovanni is a very powerful and corrupt businessman that always seeks to find better organization deals and power, money and power. We know that Giovanni is probably one of the stronger and probably one of the more well-respected villains in the Pokemon universe, because he had a whole, like, after Red kicked his ass like a few times, and Giovanni being like a master of disguise, he was the 8th gym leader of the Kanto region before, and that's why the gym was locked. And then, you'd go there when you had all 7 badges, and Giovanni just mysteriously returns just moments before you show up. And then you find out that, you find out who it really was. But Giovanni was Team Rocket's organization leader. So Giovanni was originally never supposed to be, he was actually supposed to be a flying type gym leader in the 8th gym. However, though, but before we even get into this, we're also supposed to believe that Giovanni was well known for collecting like his own Pokemon. Either they steal it from other Pokemon or they go into like wild areas and steal it. So he had a lot of corrupt people that worked with him, but they were all did in by Red, and then Team Rocket got disbanded for 3 years before the people themselves were trying to find Giovanni, but they were trying to find like leadership to reorganize and all that. So basically, Giovanni was the kind of guy that was always looking for ways to improve what he was doing because he wanted to conquer things. So it only made sense that Giovanni would eventually find himself looking for powerful Pokemon such as like the legendaries or even Mewtwo. Again, the strongest Pokemon of all, in quotes, man-made Pokemon. But there are Pokemon that even beat Mewtwo very easily. Even Mewtwo can be easily defeated if you know how to take it out retrospectively. I mean, there are ways. But anyways, so this is what we know so far. So when Pokemon was first created, the idea was that, in the movie, they kind of gave more details. I guarantee you these ideas could have also been from the prototype. So bear with me here. So this is what the final version of this is what we know. You fight Giovanni in the Rocket Casino at the very bottom, and he gets word that some kid was running around and gave him problems, but then he gets mad because you beat him. He couldn't believe he lost to a child. So, he eventually congratulates Red for actually raising his Pokemon with deep care. Eventually, so the Rockets overtook the Pokemon Tower and took some of the ghost Pokemon, or they killed the Cubone, the Marowak, the Cubone's mother, and the Cubone's ghost haunts the Marowak's ghost haunts the Poke Tower. But it's also very possible, and this is just a possibility, but there was another Pokemon that the Marowak evolves into. It's called Guardia. It's very possible that wasn't necessarily Cubone's real mother. It could have been just downgraded. Again, there's a lot of things that changed, and we're even getting a little off topic here, but basically they killed a Marowak in the final version of the games. Cubone's mother's running around somewhere. Cubone itself is running around somewhere. So they took the Silphco. They took the Silphscope. You need the Silphscope in order to see ghosts. So in order to technically, beat the Poke Tower, you need the Silphco from the Rocket Casino. So Giovanni was on his way to the, eventually after that he takes over Saffron City's Silphco, because eventually, because he finds out that he wanted Mewtwo's the Master Ball. He needed it from the Silphco president because he could capture Mewtwo. He wanted the Master Ball so he could capture Mewtwo. Pokeball that never fails. Where to get him? You get him from you know, the market, or you get it from the president himself. So anyways, but this is where it gets interesting though. So even though you technically do stop Giovanni after you beat him in the third time you fight him in the 8th gym, and that's it. You know, Giovanni's nowhere to be found in Gen 1 after that. However, though, you know, whatever happened to Giovanni? You know, the idea was that he disappeared because he couldn't believe what happened, even though he told Red that he swore that he'd come back. But this is what we know. This is what the story that we don't know. Okay, so where's Mewtwo at? Like after you beat the Elite Four, and where the most rational place you'd be thinking of is the Celadon. Not Celadon City, I would say. Cerulean City. There's a cave that's guarded by somebody. A bunch of powerful Pokemon there. Obviously, you know, even if you got Surf, you couldn't technically go there because the Pokemon are strong, like in the 60s and all that. Mewtwo's at the very bottom. Level 70 Mewtwo. That's what we've been told. But based on prototype maps and all that, that was actually where Moltres was supposed to be. And the Unknown Dungeon was technically a lot different. But you didn't have to beat the Elite Four to get there, because that was being blocked. It was not being blocked off. So hence you go in there and you can catch like a bunch of fire type Pokemon, because that's where Moltres was. It's like a cave that goes down, kind of like Articuno. You know, it goes into the cave, gets colder, gets hotter because it's like near a volcano sort of, and it just goes in another cave that just goes inside the cave. You know, a bunch of erosions and all that, for example. Same thing happens with, like, on Earth, for example. So you would go in there, and then Moltres would be in there. You'd solve a strength puzzle. Kind of like similar to Mount Ember's Summit. If you played Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, you would see how that would work. You know, it's kind of like Moltres is just standing there waiting for somebody to... Obviously, Moltres doesn't have to push the boulders, because it just flies on the summit. But anyways, so Mewtwo... But this is the story that we're not told, though. But basically, Mewtwo was created in a lab. We know that much. But the one who was behind all of it was Dr. Fuji, the same one that you rescued from the Poke Tower and all that. Dr. Fuji, along with a bunch of other scientists, created that. Cinnabar Island basically went up in flames because of it. Again, you get a lot of this information from the movie. But the full version of it, basically, what ends up happening is... so, sometime before the whole story comes into play, we know that Mew was a Pokemon. Not too many people have ever seen Mew, but there was said to be, like, there's been kind of debates, even in some prototype data. I'd had to find it, but they state that Mew actually gave birth to Mewtwo through a fossil, basically. Not like literal sexual, but genetic modifications, because Mewtwo was a created clone of Mew using Mew's genetics. So, I think it was from like an eyelash or something of Mew. So maybe there's more than one Mew, basically. I wouldn't be surprised. So, basically, a bunch of scientists in South America or Africa? I think it's South America. They discovered Mew, and they discovered the fossils, or what they would use to bring back using genetic coding. They eventually found a way to resurrect the Pokemon using said material, and they brought it back. They created Mewtwo, and Mewtwo obviously turned vicious due to its experiments and its powers, and didn't want to be controlled by people, so he killed all the scientists and basically destroyed Cinnabar Island for what it really was. And I mean, it's possible that that's also why the Poke Mansion was destroyed. I mean, aside from the volcano that basically destroyed Cinnabar Island in a couple of years, basically from what we understand. So, you know, a lot of it changed, but basically, let's just focus on the Gen 1 events, though. So, eventually we find out that while Cinnabar Island is technically burning to the ground, or at least to some degree, at one point Mewtwo actually was approached by Giovanni, who wanted... So Giovanni knew about Mewtwo's existence, and he wanted something to do with it. However, though, what ended up happening, though, was over time, Giovanni was finding ways to improve himself even for his own organization, his own ends. So basically Mewtwo refused Giovanni's help, and so Giovanni swore that one day he would eventually get that power somehow, whether through technical means or through force. So basically, this is what we know so far about Pokemon. Somewhere in Fuchsia City, one of the unused maps and all that was actually supposed to be of Giovanni's, like, it was like a hideout somewhere. Who knows if it was even just for Giovanni, but, you know, there was like it was like an abandoned area, abandoned building, right next to where you would get the good rod. And so basically it was supposed to be like an unused map that had nothing. It was, they're storing Mewtwo's data, but the machine was destroyed and had a picture of Mewtwo saying, like, we have this Pokemon in captivity. This is where we've kept it. It's possible that that map could have, I mean, maybe it could have been, they could have transported Mewtwo from Celadon, from the lab to Cinnabar Island. I mean, it's possible because, again, you could surf down the coast and then to the west side and eventually find yourself in the Seafoam Islands, but then, like, you could cross that bridge or that gap and then go back to Cinnabar Island, continuing to the west. But in the games, you got to go into the cave of Seafoam Islands, where Articuno was, and then exit out of it. So basically, it's kind of like they probably flew Mewtwo to Cinnabar Island before it burned it down. Or maybe maybe that map could have been moved somewhere to Cinnabar Island. But anyways, the laboratory was destroyed, though, as well as the Pokemon mansion where Mewtwo was essentially created. All the data and all that was lost, and then it was just being archived. It was basically being run over by a bunch of looters and all that, because there was a lot of stuff there. You know, a huge wealthy mansion. You know, what are you gonna find in it? You know, who wouldn't want to take their chances with that, right? But anyways, so basically you go there and you find a bunch of interesting things. Later on, fast forward to Pokemon, let's see here, Gen 1, we find out that Giovanni is hiding out in the Rocket Casino because, you know, that's where he's at. And so basically Giovanni's like hanging out there, and, you know, you confront him after they've raided the Poke Tower. Again, they take the Silph Scope and all that. And Giovanni's running a bunch of, you know, basically stealing people's money in the Rocket Casino and all that. But they don't know the Mafia. Basically, Giovanni's a Mafia leader, and much worse than that. So later on, fast forward to, basically, so we find out somewhere around this time that the Dr. Fuji was one of the leading scientists that's still alive, actually was conducting research even on Mewtwo, and he actually had ideas that they should store Mewtwo somewhere safer in an area where you're not even supposed to find it, but it's well guarded in the Silph Co. So Giovanni goes to the Silph Co. later on to try to get the Master Ball to catch Mewtwo. And he's trying to conduct business with the president there. But what's really interesting, though, is if you remember in Cinnabar Island in the Fuchsia City, before you can even while the Rockets have already taken over the Silph Co. Tower, if you think about it, you actually had to go to the Cinnabar Island where you got Surf, and the guy who was supposed to give you Surf you actually had to fight him instead. It was actually the Silph Co. President. He ran away from Giovanni because he knew that, you know, he was coming after him for what he had, but he couldn't find what he was looking for. They took the tower over, but they couldn't find the president. So eventually Giovanni Red basically convinced the Silph Co. President that, you know, maybe you shouldn't run from this guy. Maybe you should confront him and, you know, settle business scores with him. So he basically agreed to that. But Red gets there just in time that he can take care of Giovanni himself, because Giovanni's like, oh, you're back, huh? He's like, well, let's see what you've learned, basically. So he loses to Red again, and, you know, obviously, you know, he can't believe that, you know, even his whole organization's being done in by a child, basically. Basically, his will matches Giovanni's, you know. And anyways, so Giovanni basically says that he's like, all right. He's like, so he'll back off from the Silph Tower now, because doesn't want to do business there anymore. So so later on, you find out that Giovanni was supposed to be hanging out. Like, okay, so Giovanni's nowhere to be found, for now at least. But it's not shortly after until you get this. After you get the 7th badge, you go to the 8th gym. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Giovanni changes teams a lot. Giovanni was never supposed to be a ground type gym leader. As a matter of fact, he actually was a flying type gym leader at this point. He always had this Pokemon called Impressive, which is what Farfetch would have later evolved in, or Madam rather. That's what it was supposed to be in the 1997 Space World demo. So you have this, or Surfetch, if you played Gen 8. It's kind of a little different. It looks a lot different. But it's, but Farfetch did, yes, have a Pokemon that it evolved into. And I guess it wasn't until Gen 8 they decided, well, maybe we should give Farfetch another chance. So Giovanni has a bunch of flying types. And basically the Earth badge, it looks like a feather. People have pointed this out many times. And basically that's kind of explains where this comes from. Giovanni had a bunch of bird type Pokemon, or this was the beta of Pokemon, the flying types. So Giovanni fights Red beats him, and so Red's like, okay, so he's got given the 8th badge, now he can take on the Elite Four. But Giovanni tells Red that he will return. You will see him again somewhere. And sure enough, believe this or not, after you beat the Elite Four, there's actually this thing where you can take on a boss rush in the Silphco. The Silphco looks a little bit different. There's more, again, going based on beta maps. And all the trainers are there from like most of the trainers, including the gym leaders and all that, and you can fight them again and all that. I can't say the same for Erica. Erica's there, but I never got a chance to fight her. I don't know what she would have. I think she'd have like Victory Bell, Vileplume, and some other Pokemon that she usually uses. But anyways, you get there, and there's always been the speculation of that Professor Oak was supposed to be the final boss of the game. And I mean, technically speaking, when you get to the end of it, Professor Oak is the final boss. You have to beat him. He's stronger than actually his grandson is, because again, he's still his grandson. So you beat him, you beat Professor Oak, and then you can, they talk about how you can go challenge Mewtwo, and because that's where they're hiding Mewtwo. It's in the Silphco, and basically it was supposed to be like, they had this original concept where like somewhere in the last room you were going to find Mewtwo, but it was supposed to be like a 1% encounter rate, but you don't know where it was going to encounter, so you had to look for it a little bit, which is really cool, because anybody who plays Pokemon, that Mewtwo was the Solidation legendary. Like it was right in front of you. Like it didn't move or anything. You just had to go out there and interact with it. It was a stationary legendary. That's what I try to figure out. But before you fight Professor Oak, though, you actually find Giovanni up there for the last time. And he's got all 3 legendary birds, Zapdos, Moltres, and Articuno. And again, if you have a rock types, like Rock Slide, you can easily kill them instantly, because it's like ×4 damage. Except for Zapdos, I believe it's ×2. But yeah, so that would explain a lot about Giovanni. Giovanni was supposed to be, looking for Mewtwo, and there's a lot of ideas they had that were scrapped. Like, Giovanni was a flying type, but again, at the same time, he changed his teams, because he didn't always just use the same Pokemon. He was always using rare, powerful Pokemon like Nidoqueen, Scyther, Tor. I don't know if you ever had Tauros. Like he used powerful Pokemon, or Kangaskhan, for example. Again, like normal stab bonuses. Like when a Pokemon uses like a normal attack based on its normal, uses a type, the same type move that it is a type, so that way it gets a power bonus. If you didn't know that, one of the many things Pokemon does. But yeah, so Giovanni, the story always was that Giovanni was always trying to pursue more powerful Pokemon, and at the same time, though, Mewtwo was just hidden somewhere. But it was thanks to the power of the Silphco chief. You actually find even more diary entries later on when you're on that same floor. Before you get to Mewtwo, it states like how Dr. Fuji was very sorry that he created Mewtwo and the way he did. He says, I just hope that, there's a trainer out there that ever reads this that, basically could find the will to forgive him, basically. I think it's also worth noting that Mewtwo was still supposed to be, like, again, like I've said before, like Satoshi Tajiri stated that many of the ideas that they did have, they did end up using in the end, while some stuff was moved around. But in the end, like, they still try to maintain the story as much as possible. Like, Mewtwo was still, like, a very powerful legendary, was created by a bunch of scientists. Mew was so rare, and nobody would ever think it was still alive. It could be somewhere else. But Mew was always there, though, just watching people. And Mew was pretty good at hiding itself, basically. Then there was, what was it? Who was the other Pokemon? So yeah, Giovanni used, like, a bunch of really rare, powerful Pokemon over time. Kind of like Red, he raised his own team, and then, he caught a bunch of, even though his rival was always bragging about how he caught all these Pokemon and whatnot, but over time, he, even Green got his ass kicked by Red, because he just couldn't beat him. Like, after a certain point in time, Red got so damn good at what he did, it just, like, nobody could beat Red except for Ethan, I believe it was. Gold or Ethan. From Pokemon Gen 2. Because, Red was on Mount Silver. The one mountain that most people were scared to climb because they thought that, but Red scaled it all the way and made it to the top. And he was just there, staring it down. But anyways, so yeah, Giovanni would go off to be, like, head off somewhere else. Probably to think about what he's done, and, like, because Red really taught him something, deep down, that, you really shouldn't do these things. But at the same time, though, maybe Giovanni really, there's the theory that Giovanni eventually committed suicide. But then there's debates that, maybe he came back in Gen 2, because the Space World 1997 demo states with all its prototype maps that Giovanni wasn't even, like, technically speaking, we know that Silver is supposed to be Giovanni's son, but maybe at one point he never was. So Giovanni was still, like, the evil, corrupt gangster that we know him as. But over time, we don't really know 100% about what other ideas they might have had. Maybe Giovanni wasn't supposed to be killed off, but I think as of right now, there's that theory where, like, if you take the time Celebi from Gen 4, I think it's in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. I don't know if it's in Platinum, Diamond, and Pearl as well. But you basically get this time traveling Celebi. You can go back in time and fight Giovanni. And after that, you can kind of basically hear him just, like, disappear somewhere, like, as if he just was nowhere to be found. Like, that's the last time we've ever heard of Giovanni. So again, who knows? Who knows? Because, Giovanni's like a wanted man, but if he was done in by Red, you'd be like, wow, man, maybe he really wasn't so powerful after all in some cases. Even though he was, people were scared of him, but not Red, though. Red scaled him and pushed him back, and he fought him tooth and nail, and eventually found out that, eventually Red actually succeeded in catching what Giovanni was even after at some point. That's nuts, man. But it's interesting how the first generation of Pokemon really kind of kicked us off like that. That's the story we were all told, and it was a hell of a good entry to the very first games that we've never seen. So basically, Mewtwo was moved to the Celadon City, and to Silphco. So not Celadon City, the Saffron City, and then we find out later on Moltres was in fact moved to the unknown cave, unknown dungeon, as it's known in Japanese, and it was a lot different. And Professor Oak was the true final boss of Pokemon as a boss rush. So that way we would. So again, I don't think there's anything else I can think of, but basically, the concept of Pokemon was. It was that from a very point of view. Giovanni was after Mewtwo. Mewtwo had a lot of lost history. Mewtwo was moved around a lot and even had a bunch of hidden you know, they were keeping them safe, but like there was like these abandoned laboratories that were found with a picture of Mewtwo. It gave you, you know how like, you know, like you talk to that one guy on the SSN where like, you know, he's like, shh, he's like, I'm undercover. He's like, I've heard there's this sleeping Pokemon that you can find though somewhere like in the world, and it shows you a picture of Snorlax. It kind of does that. It opens it up. Like you can see Mewtwo like picture, and it's like, well, what is that Pokemon? You know, never seen that before. You know, it's just like one of those ominous things you stumble across. You're like, what the hell is this? And then all of a sudden it's like you see a machine that's been destroyed. You know, something was there, but it's like, what was it? It's kind of intimidating. The nightmare fuel. You know, now it's like the paranoia kicks up, and then you're trying to figure out what is this, you know? But anyways, yeah, Mewtwo had a very dark history, and a lot changed. I would still argue, you know, I still want to know. It's like stuff like this that makes me wonder how many ideas they really had that they scrapped. But at the same time, there's enough details if you pay enough attention. Even in the final releases of the game, you can still tell that those were the ideas they wanted to stick with. Like for example, we know that Mewtwo was created in a laboratory. We know that Mew came before Mewtwo, obviously. And we also know that Mewtwo rejected wanting to settle on anything but itself. Mewtwo was a Pokemon that would fight things to prove its own Alpha Omega stage. Right? If you want to believe that Alpha or Omega is better, I think Omega in the long run is a lot more powerful than an Alpha. But some people might disagree with that. Again, I always thought Omega, as far as like the Greek symbols go, that Omega was technically higher than Alpha. But I could be wrong. You know, fun fact, even when I created my name on YouTube, I used to call myself the Alpha Omega video game god, but it was like, then I started thinking, well, what if Omega's technically higher? Didn't really think about that until after I made it. I deleted that account and made this one. So it's actually pretty interesting though how things change. But yeah, but anyways. So when Satoshi Tajiri, they created Mewtwo, and then Mew came into existence, in the way the index numbers come. Mewtwo Mewtwo was drawn first, but Mew was technically thought up of first because Satoshi Tajiri started saying, so Mew was technically first. But it's funny though because, you know, Mew was the very first Pokemon that was ever technically trademarked, even before Pokemon was finalized, because again they had to have the idea at some point, and hence Satoshi Tajiri's favorite Pokemon is Mew. So that's pretty cool actually, and only a few people really knew about its existence even before they created it. So that's actually a pretty interesting story actually. It also makes you wonder what else Satoshi Tajiri and the rest of the Pokemon crew know about its lost history. Because Pokemon is that trilogy. It does make you wonder how many ideas were created, revamped, or just scrapped altogether. But maybe somewhere in their database, they might actually have it saved somewhere that we don't know about. And so anyways, I'll give you another example. This is something to think about. So if Kanto is a little bit different than it's, you know, what we've been seeing it as, what other ideas they might have had in the past that they could have changed or maybe just cut altogether? How many prototype maps, how many Pokemon that we don't know about could be